Here are just a couple of tips for how you can use asynchronous discussions with discussion threads in Canvas to continue class participation, even when that's difficult with online learning. Even if you're a Canvas novice, it's really easy to add a discussion. Just go to the discussions link, and that will take you to a page where you'll be able to simply add a new discussion for your course. When you click that, you can then create a title for your discussion, something that will catch students' interest and draw them in. And then you'll be able to add a longer description in the larger box. And here's where you can elaborate on what you'd like students to think about and respond to for this particular discussion thread. Now, beyond just adding a description, you have several different options. I like to include threaded replies. I'll show you what that looks like. I also like to require people to post before seeing a reply. And I like people to be able to easily like one another's posts. You can schedule the discussion in advance or just go ahead and publish it at the time you create it. And once you do that, students will be able to see the discussion in their Canvas page, and they'll be able to easily click reply and add their thoughts for that discussion. Now, they can add their own primary response, which is something that I require students to do, or at least I ask them to do that. And in addition to adding their own personal response, they'll also be able to reply to one another. And this is why I like to use threaded replies, because it creates a little bit more of a discussion feel. And so if someone likes a post and then replies to that post, it starts to build upon the comments that someone else has made and makes it a little bit more akin to that interactive style of discussion that usually occurs in an in-class format. But here it's happening obviously asynchronously and online, which is sometimes more feasible for students who may be in different time zones or who simply may lack as high-quality internet access that they would need to interact with one another during a synchronous in-class session with Zoom. So now let me share just a couple of examples of how I've used these in my classes. Within each module, I usually have after the session a discussion for that topic. And so for this topic, for example, I asked students whether they'd rather have their performance assessed by a computer or by a professor. And as you can see, that generated an incredibly rich dialogue among students as they shared their own thoughts and experiences with having class participation assessed by professors. Or as another example of how I use this, I asked students to reflect on how measures were being used for the COVID-19 pandemic. I gave them an article that they could read and then reflect on, and then they provided their responses on whether different measures would be appropriate for responding to COVID-19. And so in each of these examples, students engaged in a vigorous way in the discussion, both responding to one another, but also offering their own opinions and thoughts on the topic. Here are 5 tips for using asynchronous discussion threads in your courses. First, set the tone for effective asynchronous discussions at the very start of a course by incorporating engagement in them into students' participation grade. This signals that this is an important part of the class and also gives a way for students who may not be able to contribute during synchronous class sessions a way to engage and be rewarded for their contributions. Second, define engagement as not just making a post to the thread, but responding to others' ideas. This is a wonderful way of stimulating the kind of interaction that best parallels the kinds of interactions that students might have in the classroom. Third, post a prompt that's relevant to your students, that connects to the practical realities of their lives. As examples, I shared connecting to COVID-19, something that students were going through and are still going through right now. I also shared an example of assessing class participation. This is something that's meaningful to students and something on which they have a strong opinion that they are more than willing to share with one another. Fourth, actively engage in the discussion yourself. This is critical. Make sure you're going in, liking posts if you enable liking, and also responding and replying to your students. This can be time-consuming, but a few posts, especially at the start of the discussion, is a wonderful way to let students know that you're keeping tabs on the discussion and that you're seeing the contributions that they're making. Finally, reference the discussion during your in-class synchronous sessions. I found that this was a wonderful way to build a bridge between the online experience that students were having and those experiences that we were having together when we were in synchronous sessions. And so just at the start of a class session, making a few comments about general themes or hot button issues that came up in the online discussion not only builds the bridge, but also further signals to students that this is something that you are aware of and that you're engaged in their contributions asynchronously as well as synchronously. So these were just 5 tips for using asynchronous discussion threads. It's a wonderful way to build out a new part of your course that is especially relevant for the hybrid model as well as for the fully online model.